Welcome into episode. Ooh, I gotta be quiet. It's so loud in here. So we gotta whisper. Welcome in to episode 355, I believe it is, of the Source Say Podcast, your go-to Kentucky basketball and recruiting podcast on the growing KSR Podcast Network. I am your host, Jack Pilgrim of Kentucky Sports Radio, but also we're presented by Club Blue. Club Blue is the official collective partner of the University of Kentucky. We're a little discombobulated because it's been a really, really hectic day that we are so excited to talk about. We are here where it just means more.
They can only see the more part, but they get the message.
In Birmingham, Alabama, for SEC Media Day 2025, the debut of Mark Pope. Zach Gagan, what's going on, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. I'm glad to be in Birmingham. This is my third year doing this. You didn't go last year because you had a child or something happened.
Something like that.
But this is our second time us doing it together. We went to Topgolf last night, had a lot of fun there. And today we spent literally, what time did we get here? It's 6:45 Central Time. We got here at 9? Or was it before then?
We got here at,
I think right at 9 is actually when we got here, maybe like 9:05 or something like that. So we've talked to 16 coaches, 32 players. It's been a big day. Obviously, with the addition of Texas and Oklahoma, it kind of makes things go a little bit longer, but we were here for it. Everyone had good things to say about Mark Pope, even John Calipari of all people. We'll dive into it more here in a second. But yeah, it's been a great day, great trip so far. We'll be back again tomorrow to cover Kenny Brooks, Georgia Moore, and Deja Lawrence when they do their women's basketball version tomorrow. So the basketball doesn't stop. Talking season, I guess, is almost over at this point, right?
It's a day.
It starts and ends pretty quickly.
It's a day of talking season, but you guys are here for the John Calipari transition into Mark Pope. So was what everybody wanted to talk about today. It was Mark Pope's first ever SEC Media Day, where he comes in wearing a Letterman jacket, gets a nice little Greg Sankey, that looks like something you might have worn back in the day. And he told a hilarious story that Mark Evans, the UK equipment manager, lays out the UK gear for recruiting visits, and he just took that from the set of what Malachi Moreno would be wearing that jacket, and he said, I need to have that in my closet.
Wouldn't it be funny if he came in with a shovel, a toy shovel?
We don't do that around here anymore. That's reserved for other administrations.
I will say on that note, it just kind of speaks to Pope and how he buys into the Kentucky brand, because when he was mentioning Mark Evans, he immediately was like, best manager since Bill Kitely. Gave Bill Kitely a little shout out and talked about him for a second too. So it's just fun that Pope really goes back and likes to talk about all the decades, the past decades, 5, 6, 7 decades back. Obviously we saw it at Big Blue Madness, but it's a little bit different than kind of the last 15 years where it's been more or less about the guys from that era, whereas Pope really makes it a point to go out of his way to pump up and talk about people from the past that made big impacts on the program.
Yeah, so just some of the bigger picture takeaways from Mark Pope's appearance, at least, talking a lot about the strength of the SEC and just coming in from the Big 12 where, he was kind of thrown into the fire of high-level basketball, going to the Big 12 at BYU and then making the transition now to the SEC in Kentucky, and just talking about we got 10, 11 teams potentially going to make the NCAA tournament this year. Kentucky's projected to finish 8th in the conference. Even still, 8th would still
top 25 in the country,
and could still be a top 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. So it's just one of those years where the league is so unbelievably strong that even a good year, the teams are going to just eat each other alive all season long, where you might get another 4-way tie for second place like we saw last year. It's just, this is a new day and age in the SEC. This is not like 2011 where it was, Kentucky, maybe Florida, maybe
Vanderbilt of all teams.
But it was 1 or 2 and then everybody else stunk. This is a situation where most teams in the league are incredible and only maybe 1 or 2 stink. So just a lot of just kind of talking big picture about the competition and just how unbelievably difficult this season is going to be. One heck of a way to kind of throw yourself in with the Sharks if you're Mark Pope.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Well, I'll take it
just
here.
Bounce it.
We're handing off the microphone. It's like we're doing a rapid reaction at Rep from last year. But yeah, so the league is, and that was the talking point for pretty much every coach. That question was asked in some form. The league is very deep. How do you kind of approach it? And Pope's, and it was actually kind of the same for Porter Moser and Rodney Terry, was We were in the Big 12 last year. Big 12 was almost inarguably the best conference in the league last year. And especially for Mark Pope, that was his first year in that conference. So it's almost nothing new to Pope at this point of having to jump into a new conference and play in a deep conference with a lot of really talented teams. We saw them. I think they beat Baylor last year. Pope did so he's played all these really good teams. And I was talking to one of the Texas players, and he remembers playing against him last year and how tough it was. And actually, I'll say his name here to kind of go off a little mini tangent. Caden Shedrick for Texas. This was a kid that Pope recruited last offseason to come to BYU. And he sat and talked to me for a minute about how much he loved Pope's energy and his focus on analytics. And, obviously the opportunity to play at Texas was probably a little bit better than BYU. So I'm not going to hold it against him for that, but he said great things. And this was a whole, we have an entire article that I'm reading right now that Jack had the idea to come up with, where it's basically, let's see what these players know about Pope. And I was actually shocked at how many of them have had some sort of interaction with him in the past through the portal or whatever it was, or even back in high school, there was one kid from Wasatch in Utah. That's Nolan Hickman territory, Wasatch. Look at me tapping back into the old days. And how he recruited a bunch of his teammates there, and how the one word that he said was high energy, or the phrase was high energy all the time. He really does have a lot of energy. So this is, I think we know at this point that it's confirmed that this is how he is all the time, but you're just getting strangers coming up to us and saying, yes, what you see is actually what you're getting. So that was a long way to say that, yes, the SEC is very, very deep. But it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to make for a really challenging schedule. By the time March comes around, Pope's going to know pretty much exactly what he has with his team. That was another point, Jack. I'm sorry, I'm going to talk again about. Shoot, I forgot my point already.
Big game.
Here, you go ahead, and I'll think of it.
He talked a big game, and he couldn't even come up with what he was. See,
Pope said he wants to get exposed.
Yeah.
That was
out of context college basketball.
Yeah, the way he said it, okay. I wasn't thinking about it like that, but apparently Jack was. He says he wants his team to get exposed early. He wants to get smacked in the mouth by these exhibition teams. He says, show us what we're doing wrong. There's kind of weird ways you can interpret that quote. You could think of it as he knows that there's flaws with the team, but he's being real and he's being honest. And I thought that was interesting that he noted that. He said, I want to see they're just tired of playing each other. They want to play someone else at this point. And they're going to get that opportunity here very soon, and then tough non-conference schedule and then a very tough conference schedule. So we're going to know pretty much exactly what this Kentucky team is by January, I feel like.
Yeah, that's where you want to be. You want, as the wide words of somebody that we just spoke to, you want your team to be playing its best basketball in March and playing.
Who said that?
John Calipari.
Speaking of
John Calipari, well, a couple quick notes to wrap up. Mark Pope just talked about just enjoying and embracing Kentucky basketball and understanding just the magnitude of this. Kind of hitting some of the go-tos definitely, but his chance on the national stage for the first time to kind of address some of those things, and being here for the first time, and being able to rave about his roster. Talked about Jackson Robinson. Talked about some of the different guys and contributors. What he's learned about his team throughout practice, and some of the early preseason going into the season workouts and different things like that. So kind of seeing him in his element for the first time, where hopefully we see him at this SEC Media Day for a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. That'd be awesome. Just let's keep this thing running. So a lot of really good stuff there for Mark Pope. Also want to ask Lamont Butler and Jackson Robinson were the player representatives for the Cats. What did you think of their debuts? I personally asked about Lamont Butler's debut rap song called Wildcats. If you have not heard it yet, go on YouTube. It's some great stuff. Shout outs to every single player on the roster, from Jackson Robinson all the way down to Grant Derbyshire, getting shout outs from Lamont Butler. He said that that was actually Mark Pope's idea to perform his song at Big Blue Madness. Basically said, hey, this is your platform. This is your time to kind of introduce yourself to the Big Blue Nation. No better way to do that than by rapping your own song. If you're going to make a song, might as well perform it on the biggest stage in college basketball. So some cool, entertaining, lighthearted stuff. Jackson Robinson kind of throwing a little bit of shade there at Eric Musselman. That kind of went mini viral. An Arkansas reporter asked very kindly just what he learned from his experience at Arkansas, and did not have anything to say. It wasn't good, bad. He just said, I have nothing to say about Eric Musselman. So I asked him at UK Media Day about, is there any game that you're looking forward to on the schedule? Are you excited for to be joining the SEC? And he said, I have one game circled on my calendar, and that's all I'll say about that. And I was like, clearly one of his former teams, Texas A&M, Arkansas.
Kentucky Wesleyan.
But I think we know what team he's talking about. But some very cool, interesting stuff from the two of 7 super seniors that Mark Pope signed and brought in this offseason.
Yeah, another note on the Butler rap. Like you said, that Pope kind of told him to do it. Jackson says that he's like sitting on a whole pile of unreleased songs as well. So I don't know if we just need Lamont to kind of, show off the wordplay. Like, I want to see a little bit more of it. So, and Jackson also said they warm up to this song too. The songs during practice, which is hilarious to me, to be perfectly honest with you, if they're listening to a song that mentions all their names while they're working out. But hey, if it brings the team together, a little continuity, some chemistry, I'm all here for it. And
he also said that no ghostwriters. Every word was written by Lamont Butler. So all the funny wordplay and double entendres and everything, that was 100% Lamont Butler's doing. So if you have any gripes, if you have any criticisms, direct them directly to Lamont. Or if you have positive praise for them, share those with Lamont as well, because I personally thought it was pretty solid.
Well, and you and I, after Big Blue Madness, tried to decipher a handful of the lines, and just because it actually took us a few times to be like, what the hell did he say? And it actually, he tricked us a little bit in that way to
shout out KP.
Yeah, to channel my inner Kenny Payne. But yeah, so and then Jackson too, I think another notable thing, obviously, he talked about the Arkansas thing, which was kind of funny. Doesn't seem like a lot of people like Musselman, or just kind of comes off that way, just from an outsider's perspective at least. But Jackson did reveal that he literally waited until the very last second. Like, I didn't actually remember this at the time until I went back and looked, but the deadline was a Wednesday in May for the NBA draft pool, and we didn't know about Jackson until Thursday. And obviously he had made the decision on Wednesday, but like, he waited to announce it on Thursday because he literally waited until the very last moment on Wednesday night, because he was not sure if he wanted to pull out of the draft or not. He said that he did a workout in Milwaukee. I assume he's meaning with the Bucks that day. And after that workout is when he said it was still torn, and he kind of went into thinking mode. And, once he ultimately decided to pull his name out, the only path to go was to Kentucky and to follow Pope. But it was just very interesting to hear that. Because obviously, and he said the main reason he wanted to come back was just to make himself that much more ready for the NBA next year when he does go. So it's clear that he's got he's got some very clear set goals going into this final season. I was a big fan of that. I'm trying to think of anything else that really stuck out from Jackson. We've listened to the recording like 1,000 times today, and I already forget everything he said. But we've heard so many people talk today. Anything else from Lamont that stood out to you?
I did enjoy telling him about Pope's quote about wanting to kind of get smacked around a little bit and just. What was for exact phrasing
that Pope used?
Yeah,
he wanted to be exposed so they could show him where the cracks are, essentially.
So when I said, Pope said that he's excited for you guys to get exposed, you don't strike me as a player that has been exposed very often in his basketball career. And you could kind of tell that Lamont was like, that ain't me, bro. Like, I'm not the one to be exposed by Kentucky Wesleyan in an exhibition game. But I understand the point that he was trying to make of let's be exposed in our ways of winning by 35 points, but like
they just want to play someone else. That's really what it comes down to. Jackson even said, he's like, I'm tired of having Lamont Butler guard me every single day, which helps you in your progression, but it probably gets annoying after a while when you have a defensive player of the year guy defending you all the time. Like, you want to be able to show off a little bit more, and you'll just learn, because the way Pope said it obviously makes sense, is like, even if you're really, really good at offense and defense, if you're going against each other so many times every single day, you're just going to learn how the other team plays, and you're going to kind of be able to predict everything. You just won't be able to do that with new opponents, new teams. So I understand what he was saying. It was just kind of, I guess, funny how he presented it, and then Lamont's response and everything was, that's what you want out of a guy like Lamont. That you want to be like, we're not going to get exposed. We're good.
Yeah, Zakai Ziegler, I tried to, with the Pope question, with with Pope now in here, do you still circle the Kentucky game on the calendar the same way that you did under John Calipari? I tried to, pry a little bit and see just how serious they are about it. And most of them said what you would expect. Kentucky's still Kentucky. It doesn't matter who's coaching or who's playing. We're still going to view Kentucky as a blue blood. But the two Tennessee guys both just kind of said, I don't care who we're playing. I don't care who's coaching, who the players are. I don't care what the logo is, what the brand is, where we're playing, whatever. We're going to come in with the same mindset. We don't care who you are or where you come from. We're going to try to kick your ass. So I thought that was kind of like that was a pretty...
Unless your name's Reed Shepherd, then you're going to struggle, but,
Good point. But I definitely like that. But some Otega Owe praise. We saw Oklahoma. Got to ask some of the coaches about former players, the transition from the Big 12. I asked Porter Moser his thoughts on Oklahoma coming to the SEC and Mark Pope being at BYU, coaching against him in the Big 12. Same thing with Rodney Terry at Texas. So a lot of overlaps, a lot of similarities, a lot of familiarity there with Mark Pope and coming from BYU. So, definitely one of the bigger talking points today was Kentucky and, Mark Pope taking over. But
I've got another interesting note
Okay.
From the Oklahoma side, actually. You were with me when we were interviewing, let me get his name right, Sam Godwin, Oklahoma's forward, who is from the exact same town as Jackson Robinson. Jackson reclassed. I didn't know this until today that Jackson reclassed up and was a 17-year-old freshman at Texas A&M. And the whole plan, this is a separate tangent, but the whole plan with him, according to Buzz Williams, was to redshirt him. Then COVID happened, and he was going to get the free year anyway, so they ended up playing him. And that's why his stats look really funky, like when you look on his basketball reference page, like 14 games played or whatever, and like 2 points. So it was more of like a, we can use you, so why not type thing. But back to my point, those two grew up together. They said they were really good friends since like 6th grade. They were, like I said, they were not in the same grade level until like the senior year when Jackson reclassed up or whatever it was. And that town is like 15,000 people, I think is what he said, of Ada, Oklahoma. He even said that he reached out and kind of checked the temperature to see, hey, you want to come to Oklahoma too? But I think, they kind of all understood what the situation was there. But I just thought that was an interesting note that you've got two guys in the SEC from Ada, Oklahoma, and they're both going to be starter, productive level players. So that's just kind of interesting that the Oklahoma game has a little bit more juice now. I think that we can kind of take an angle for at least, or if we need to get Jackson some juice for it.
Gonna need some juice because that's definitely not one on the upper end of the priority list with the SEC schedule coming up. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. John Calipari making his debut in red and white instead of blue and white, and you could tell, Zach, that he was trying to make it as not awkward as possible. Mm-hmm. Like just kind of.
Well, off the bat, he said, "I'm not doing Kentucky questions." Our guy Myron came up immediately and talked about Kentucky, and he was like, "I've talked about it 100 times. You can go look. I'm not talking about Kentucky today." We still snuck some Kentucky questions in, but he was very quick to be like, we're not making this all about how I left Kentucky today.
It wasn't about just not wanting to talk about Kentucky as a program, but rather his decision to leave, just wanting the new chapter and just kind of closing that chapter and opening a new one and embracing this new one. And, wanted to talk about the personnel and wanted to talk about, we're banged up. We're a players first program, kind of hit some of his go-tos as well. But the moment that I definitely kind of stood out, I asked, and you could kind of tell, not wanting to make eye contact with me and knowing that a Kentucky-centered question was coming, but you could just kind of tell that he knew it was coming. I asked about Pope because Pope, right before that, said, that's a mentor, that's a friend. I have nothing but respect for John Calipari.
We left out the lead on that one where he said, I'm going to cheer for Cal. No, he said we, as in the fan base, will cheer for Cal except for February 1st, which is the Arkansas game.
So it gave me a nice little layup to say, hey, Cal, we just heard Mark Pope say that he's going to support you and your program every single day except for February 1st. What's your stance? And I will say, I thought Cal's quote was incredible.
It's his dad's birthday that day, we know.
He said, what's February 1st? That's actually my dad's birthday. What are the chances of that? So here, let me just read the full quote because I think it was pretty impactful and pretty important. He says, I think they hired the perfect guy for that job. Part of it is because he played there, graduated from there, has a heart for the place, and has an idea of what that is. When I walked in, I had Joby Hall, I had Coach Tubby Smith too, but it was mainly Coach Hall. It's a different place if you're just walking in, but he's been there and understands it. Then says, he and I have talked, I'm fully immersed in what I'm doing. I'm like, you won't believe this. I'm doing a lot of stuff, and I don't have time for any of the other stuff, any of the things out there. I'll be rooting for him. I want Kentucky to do well. Come on, man. 15 years. I gave them my heart and soul. You think I want them to do well, except on what date? February 1st. Okay, that date. A lot of love. I think he, wants it to be clear. Do you think any of it?
I don't think he wants a Pitino situation to repeat. I think he's kind of seen what's happened and how he's come back and been embraced, and I don't think he wants to have to wait that long.
I think that was what I was going to ask you. Do you think that the Big Blue Madness event and spectacle of Rick Pitino coming back and the ultimate villain, the guy that, if he was on fire, Kentucky fans wouldn't piss on him to put him out. Like, that was the villain number one in BBN. That guy had the program's the fan base's collective arms wrap around him for one night and lead Rick Pitino to have, choked up, teary-eyed. Like, that was a massive moment, and there's no way knowing John Calipari the way we have known him for 15 years, that he didn't see it, that he wasn't paying attention very, very closely, and knowing his prior relationship with Rick Pitino and just the pure bitter hatred that the fan base had toward him, that if it took that long, 3 decades to get back in BBN's good graces, that he did not want to wait that long. He wanted to stay in the BBN's good graces because, make no mistake about it, the day he calls it a career with Arkansas, and I think that will be sooner rather than later, he's going to want to fill that chair right back in Lexington. There's no doubt in my mind that he saw that opportunity and says, I want that, but I want to be a permanent fixture. So he's definitely bonding that bridge, so to speak, and wanting it to stay tight. And I think it was a very calculated move on Coach Cal's part.
I also think he understands that his situation is different than Rick's.
Yep.
Unless Cal is flipping off fans in Rupp Arena on February 1st, it probably won't be long regardless. By the time he's very well received, I'm still not entirely sure how the reception will be in February 1st. I personally think that it'll be more boos than cheers, but I think as the years go along, that's just going to quickly change in pro Cal favor, and I don't think it's still fresh here, whereas Rick went to Louisville for 16 years or whatever it was, so unless he coaches for another 16 years and things go just sour, I could see that. But I think that he knows that he just doesn't want it to ever get to that point, so he understands that, look, if I just say the nice things, people are going to be back in my good graces here in a couple of years. Or maybe he doesn't care at all. Maybe he generally doesn't, and he's just like, I'm just going to say my typical Coach Cal stuff because he literally said that he didn't want to be here, and he tried to convince Ellen, his wife, that he had a positive COVID test or something along those lines. He's like, I took a COVID test yesterday because I didn't want to come here. So I almost think he was
even tried sending an assistant for this.
Imagine if Bruiser Flynn was down here.
Fitting. Very fitting.
Honestly, I wish it would have happened. God, that would have been funny.
What would they have even done?
I wouldn't have asked. Well, I don't know. I don't think anyone would have asked him a question. It'd been funny. It'd have been good stuff. Back to you.
Very unique day. And I'll be honest.
Talk about Adu.
Let me get there. We're getting there.
He's the pro. 315 episodes. I know.
55 through 55, I believe. 56, whatever it is. Speaking of the emotions of Cal, I do think it was genuine, and I do think that I put my heart and soul into it. I think that was a very real quote there. And I didn't finish a quote. He said he's a good man and a terrific basketball coach. They hired the right guy. They really did. So really genuine response there. But I do think that the heart and soul thing matter. 15 years. That's how we should all feel about it. I think that yes, it was an ugly end, and just things could have changed, and you wanted better and more, and you didn't want it to end because, had they won the games that we expected them to, we would have wanted him to have that lifetime contract and be, retire here. Like that was the dream. It just got to the point where, as he said, the program needed a new voice because what he was selling just wasn't getting through to the fan base anymore. So you could tell it's just kind of one of those sad, bittersweet realities that we just kind of all have to awkwardly live in. And I think Adu Thiero kind of had the unfiltered version of some of Cal's real, emotions at the podium, where he kind of Cal had to just do the coach speak stuff, but Adu got some real emotion with it. I just asked, I said, Adu, I haven't gotten to talk to you since your departure. You hit the portal before Cal even announced that he was leaving. So you clearly had some type of next chapter mindset in your mind about what was next for you. Then you hit the portal, Cal leaves, you circle back with Cal, you end up following him to Arkansas. What have the last 6 months been like for you, and what's it going to be like to be on enemy territory when you return on February 1st after being, just a very loved figure in Lexington, a fan favorite in Lexington for 2 years. How do you navigate that? Kentucky was your first college shot on the biggest stage of college basketball, and now the next chapter of your life is in Fayetteville, Arkansas. What does that look like? And his reaction was just didn't cry, but long calculated responses and pauses and sitting and just kind of reflecting. You could just tell there's a lot of reflection there. And there were a couple moments where he kind of got a little choked up, where he was just kind of like, BBN, looking around the room and just talking and just babbling like everybody does in this room. It's talking season. But then he started talking about BBN and started talking about Kentucky, and he started looking directly into the camera, knowing that video is going to go out with a direct message to BBN saying, thank you for embracing me. Thank you for, helping me become the man that I am today. I would not be, because I said, what did those 2 years at Kentucky mean to you in getting your first shot and having the chance to, be a fan favorite in front of the most passionate fan base in basketball? And it didn't become a media day thing. It became I want to have a personal conversation with BBN. And that's when it kind of hit me too, where it was just like, damn, these guys are humans and they're feeling the same reaction. Like me talking to Adu Thiero and seeing Razorbacks across his chest, like that sucked. Like I love Adu Thiero. Adu is awesome. I'm gonna feel the same way about Big Z. If Big Z's big goofy ass was sitting here at SEC Media Day, I'd probably have a tear streaming down my eye. Like I love these guys. I love Coach Cal, man. Like DJ as well. And even the recruits, Billy Richmond, Boogie Flan, Carter Knox, like you had a personal connection with these guys, and now you have to just kind of awkwardly accept a reality that was necessary, but it was a bittersweet necessity that, you just kind of have to deal with. And that was the first time I saw it on the other side, that they're dealing with the same emotions that, it's the most passionate of our fan bases as well.
I don't really have actually, first of all, Adu on Arkansas's website, he's listed at 6'8", 220 pounds. The kid's still getting bigger somehow, which that might have some sort of contribution to his injuries that I think Calio mentioned that he might still be kind of hurt. Well, he said he's got like 5 or 6 guys hurt, so, Cal speak. But
boot season. Yeah,
but I'm sure Adu probably still is dealing with stuff just because his legs just don't stop growing. I don't really have a big take on the Adu situation. I'll say that he has a special place in the Big Blue Nation's heart because he came here as the end of the bench 3-star kid, sparingly played as a freshman. Then you just saw the jump as a sophomore, and you're like, man, there's just so much there. Like this kid, he's one non-injured one healthy off season away from like really putting it all together. And I don't think he had that healthy off season, but he's a quiet kid. He's very nice. He was kind of like what you want, like a 3-star kid who builds himself into a borderline 5-star type recruit, or prospect by the time he's a junior. So it is. It sucks to see a guy like Adu, because he's a guy that I'm going to cheer for very hard at Arkansas. Beyond, I just hope that he can kind of put things together before he goes to the NBA and the body gets right and he can put it all together. Because I think there's a really good player there down the road in the NBA. But it was. Yeah, like you said, it was just kind of awkward. It was just weird to be like, man, it's like to these kids, how much did they really want to leave? Did they, how much was it ado wanting to get away from Cal, which obviously doesn't appear to be the case, or maybe something changed. It's just I don't really know what's going on in these kids' lives. So it was cool to see Adu here, and I'm glad he's doing well. Just a personal note on Adu.
It was just a good vibes day. It really was. It's a good time to be a Kentucky fan. It's a good time to be a fan of the SEC, and it's a good time to be a fan of Coach Cal. Like it was very much a full circle moment for all of us. And my first time being in the same room outside of like a recruiting event or something like that, of like just, hey, Coach Cal on the job as the Arkansas head coach. My first time kind of seeing him and seeing some familiar faces with Chris Willard was here, and just different guys that have been fixtures of Kentucky basketball for so long. So bittersweet day, interesting day, but definitely a refreshing day where Mark Pope was definitely one of the highlights, and you want him to be, going to the set of SEC Network and, doing all the, making his rounds. He represents this program really, really well. And, you talk to some of the other media members that are meeting him for the first time, and they kind of say the same thing. It's like, man, he's got some pep in his step. He's got, pretty energetic, got some, clearly passionate about being the head coach here. And, talked to, Seth Greenberg a little bit before, just off the record, just us hanging out, chit-chatting. And, he just kind of talked about, said, Mark Pope's the right guy for the job. Like, in the time of Kentucky basketball right now and what that fan base needed with a shot in the arm, there is no stronger shot in the arm. I would hope not a shot in the arm, but a shot in the arm than Mark Pope. So a lot of really, really good vibe stuff coming from Birmingham. But we're going to slowly wrap this thing up. I hope this thing has been recording this whole time, because that'd be really inconvenient if not. We good?
Oh, we're rolling.
Oh,
we're 30
beautiful.
minutes.
Man. Oh, this is great.
We got another 15 comments.
Because guess what? We have ESPN's Myron Medcalf coming up right now, getting a wide lens look at the Kentucky basketball program from a national angle, because he is the national writer for ESPN for college basketball. So getting his thoughts on, Pitino's return to Rupp Arena for Big Blue Madness, Coach Cal leaving for Arkansas, Mark Pope taking over this program, the vibes, his expectation, from a national perspective of, hey, is Kentucky capable of winning a championship? Will they go to the Final Four? What is the expectation from a guy who studies all of these teams? It's really good to kind of take a peek into his brain, and I thought he did a really, really great job. So 15 minutes with Myron Medcalf coming up.
He told us about his airplane interactions at the end of the episode, so you'll have to stay tuned for that.
Do not miss out on that. That wraps us up here from Birmingham, at least for tonight. Plenty more content coming. Go to KS Board. Go subscribe over there. Make sure you go to KentuckySportsRadio.com, because we're going to have dozens upon dozens of articles upcoming about the guys we've talked to, the interviews, behind the scenes looks, things like that. So make sure you are tuned in right there, and make sure you're tuned in to my guy Zach's work. He does a great job, and we enjoy working together. We enjoy these little road trips that we go on. So Zach, where can fans find your work?
Well, as always, Jack, you can find me on Twitter, X. Well, Instagram, my handle's different, so I won't even add that. But Twitter, you can find me, ZGagan, KSR. Gagan is GeoGheGan, the triple G. I'm everywhere on KSR, on KS Board. I'm talking about everything. I'm sure I'll be writing about high school football in a couple days or something like that. So find me wherever. Just type in my last name. There's not many Zach Gagans in this world.
With that,
Thank God.
Myron Medcalf coming up right now. But before that, Club Blue is the official collective partner of the University of Kentucky. Club Blue was founded by UK fans strictly to support the NIL efforts at the University of Kentucky. Unlike most collectives, 100% of subscriber money and 100% of donor money goes directly to NIL. Club Blue charges no fees. Club Blue subscribers receive some amazing benefits like invitations to special events, meet and greets, and UK athletes signed sign merchandise, monthly giveaways, ticket giveaways, Club Blue merch, and more. Subscribe today at www.clubbluenil.com. You get to pick which sport you want to support when you sign up. Choose your sport and support with Club Blue.
Beautiful.
Jack Pilgrim, Zach Gagan. Oh, Blue White Gang this Friday with Club Blue. Make sure you go buy those tickets. An NIL event that's going to pay for some of the high-profile recruits that you want as BBN.
Y'all want Caleb Wilson?
I wasn't going to say it, but pretty important to make that happen. So make sure we want to see you at historic Memorial Coliseum on Friday at the Club Blues Blue-White preseason experience. Now here comes Myron Medcalf. We are now happy to be joined by none other than ESPN's Myron Medcalf. I guarantee you've heard him on Kentucky Sports Radio. You know him, you love him. Myron, we get to be here and kind of introduce the SEC basketball season. Just some of your big picture takeaways, some of the things you heard today.
Well, it showed up fast. I mean, it's amazing, man. It was like we started football, and now here we are, SEC season ready to go. I mean, it's different, right? I mean, you add Texas, Oklahoma. That's a big change. It's still weird to see Cal and Arkansas, stuff. That's still weird. And then, obviously Mark Pope as the new face of Kentucky. I think it's a really talented league. I mean, you can make the case it's certainly the best league top to bottom in the country. I think the Big 12 obviously has an argument as well, but it's going to be a fun league to watch.
Our viewers, obviously, two men that they cared about today. Mark Pope obviously making his debut here in Birmingham, and then John Calipari to follow, obviously wearing his new gear. Let's start with Mark Pope. New energy, new vibes around Lexington. Just what do you know of him? What was your reaction seeing him today for his first time in Birmingham?
Well, I follow Mark around the country, so I saw him at Peach Jam. I flew down there to see him. I was talking to him here today. Talked to him outside a little bit. I mean, he's got all the right answers. I think his sense of, confidence in himself, you can see that, but there's also humility there. He just doesn't seem dazzled by all of this, which I think is pretty shocking because that's a big job to take. BYU is a big job, but this ain't BYU. And then to be center stage, the whole world's kind of watching you here. He just has a sense of kind of who he is, and I think you're kind of seeing him put a stamp on the program. Still also really kind of honoring the past. I mean, he said a lot of nice things about Cal, obviously the Rick Pitino thing. So I think he's pressing all the right buttons, but tip-off hasn't happened yet. And I think he's also aware of that part. You talk to Mark, and he's aware that, once the games begin, let's see what it is, because he understands the level of scrutiny that's going to come with that. And I think he's just approached this offseason perfectly. And Cal, Cal is Cal, man. I think he's still getting adjusted to his new home and kind of all that comes with that. I don't know how he feels about maybe not having the same profile, but it's different. I'm used to coming to a lot of these because I'm old. And Cal walks in the room and it's the whole world is kind of right there on Cal. And it wasn't like that today as much. Part because I think people are still trying to figure out what this is. But also because being the head coach of Kentucky is a different thing. So we'll see, man.
You brought up Pitino earlier. Fascinated you as an outsider, your perspective of that and just what it means on the grand scheme of things for Kentucky, for Coach Cal's departure and kind of the polarizing aspect there. But just, Rick Pitino's one of the most polarizing figures in the history of college basketball. What did that kind of moment mean to you as an outsider?
Is he still there? Has he left yet? I mean, because it felt like he was ready
I think I saw him at a Yankees game.
Yeah.
So I think
I don't know,
he's
man.
gone.
It looked like he was ready to commit to the program to me, man. So I don't know. I mean, again, one of those things that just obviously doesn't happen unless Mark Pope is there. Still surreal to see, I remember the middle finger thing, obviously at the Louisville game and Rick saying he didn't do it, and that was the whole thing. And that was the moment for me where I was like, okay, they're never going to get back together, and then it just kind of continued and continued. So I just didn't see a reunion ever coming. And then obviously Mark Pope gets hired, and that changed a lot of things. I think the way Cal ended probably opened up a path for that as well because things didn't go well. But to see Pitino at Big Blue Madness, and again, he's an acting head coach at another place. It ain't like this dude has been retired for 10 years. He's still a head coach. So I want to know what St. John's people think, honestly. Part of me is all right, I don't know, man. I'd feel a little weird maybe if I were on his team or a recruit, but he also still has a love for that place. You could tell he wanted to get back. He wanted that reception. And it sounded like it was kind of a bucket list thing for him. Hey, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to do this. Now's an opportunity, but still a little surreal. And I wrote about it for ESPN, but it was still a little bit I don't know, man. Do you want your girlfriend hanging out with the ex for a weekend and being this is great? And you're oh, okay. Did you have fun? You know, a little bit of that. So it was interesting.
While we're letting bygones be bygones and just everybody coming together in harmony, clearly, Coach Cal raving about Mark Pope, saying, I'll always be a fan of the Kentucky program, 15 years, come on, I'll always have love in my heart for that program. And then Mark Pope just being outspoken, saying, bro, this is a Hall of Famer we're talking about. I don't have any negative words to say about that. While everybody else is kind of bickering and fighting over those two, it feels like they're going, man, I don't know what they're talking about. We're bros.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're their own things. And I think that's the smartest thing Mark Pope has done. The Cal Kentucky thing is its own thing. Like, that's him, the school, the fan base. Like, that's in one pile. Mark Pope is like, I'm the new guy who also has a relationship with the school, right? Who's now the new head coach, and he's kind of building from that. It doesn't really serve anybody for him to say Cal did this or didn't do this. And I think that's probably the smartest thing he's done, is because he has really connected all these generations of Kentucky players, coach. I've never seen a coach bring that many generations together. Like, one thing you learn about college basketball, and you cover it as long as I have, is you learn about the programs where, like, former players are together, and you also learn about the programs where, like, dudes haven't been there in 20 years, right? Like, that's a real thing in college basketball that people don't realize. Like, there's a bunch of former stars across the country who you're like, hey, where's this guy? He hasn't been to a game in 15 years. He hasn't talked to that coach in 20 years. So, like, it's hard to connect the generations. So to do that in the way he's done it in a matter of 6-7 months is just pretty remarkable. But, like, I think Mark Pope knows there's no benefit to saying anything negative about Cal, and why should he? I've talked to him. Cal's been gracious to him. Cal's talked to him about the job. What else is he supposed to say? So I think he's been smart in realizing that he's got his own path. The Cal Kentucky fam, that's its own separate thing. The same way Patino's was for Cal. Like, the Patino thing, that was a whole different thing, and there's no real winner for you to get involved if you're Mark Pope. So I think he's been really smart about how he's played it.
In terms of what this fan base cares about, the X's and O's, the games being played and games being won. 23rd in the opening AP poll, I believe eighth in the SEC preseason predictions. Your expectation for Kentucky this season? Obviously, it's a really weird bunch. 12 newcomers. One guy has played for Pope. None of them have played for Kentucky before. Just how do you even, analyze a team like this when we've never really seen this before?
I kind of think we're talking a little too much about, like, the pieces not playing together, because every team has that on some level. Right. And I think it's also different because it's not like he's bringing in 8 freshmen and 4 transfers. These are all, like, grown dudes. Like, these are, like, dudes who've been around. You have a guy like Lamont Butler. Like, these are guys who've been to the mountaintop. They're coming in with a sense of urgency. They know what it's like to play at a high level. So, I don't think that will be as much of an issue. I think it's just going to come down to, like, this league being so tough, because you really don't have an easy game. And every league says that, but, like, you legitimately don't have an easy game in the SEC. So it's going to come down to, there are going to be some good teams in this league that get caught up early and just can't regain any traction. And there are going to be some teams that people maybe doubted who maybe do a little bit like what South Carolina did. It's just going to be a league where you can't go these long stretches and expect to get back on the path. And I think that'll be the thing about Kentucky, is the talent is there. I don't think there's any question about that. You got shooters, which I think you need. You got veterans. How do you play together? The one thing that I think the question about Kentucky is, who's the dog? Like, who's the dude in a game with 2 minutes left, and it's a 3-point game, and you've been going back and forth against, name the team, Auburn. Okay, somebody's got to get buckets. That is not a scheme thing. Like, that's not a let's just get the best bucket. No. Who's the dude? And I don't know if they know that yet, and I think they're going to have to figure that out.
So when a fan says, I expect Kentucky to go second weekend, I expect the Final Four, I don't know if they're going to make the tournament. Like, what should fans expect coming in terms of, like, a tangible goal for them? I know Pope says we understand the assignment, we're hanging banner number 9, all that, but if a fan wants an actual expectation of what the year looks like, what would you say that is in terms of postseason success? If
your head coach is saying it's national championship, I don't think it's crazy for fans to take that on. Not realistic. I think Mark Pope knows you get to the second weekend and you exercise some of those demons from the past 3 NCAA tournaments where you missed twice in the first round. So I think that's probably like the realistic goal, because to me, if you can make it to the second weekend, who knows what happens? Because then it's like draw and it's all these other elements. It's health. So there's a whole lot of things you can't control once you reach the second weekend. But getting to the second weekend, I think, is sort of universally recognized as an achievement, no matter what program you're talking about. Like, you get to a Sweet 16, that means something. You know, a lot of schools hang banners for Sweet 16. Y'all don't, but a lot of schools do, because it's a big accomplishment. So I think with a group like this, that's the goal. But the talent, I think it's top-tier talent. Jackson Robinson's a pro. I mean, you look at like what he's been able to do. You got Andrew Carlin, Ron Butler. Like, these are all dudes who can play at a very high level. But again, I think November, December is going to be about who's the dude on this team. Don't tell me that there are 5 guys who play that role, because that ain't college basketball. And it never has been college basketball. And it's certainly not Kentucky basketball. John Wall, guys like that. Julius Randle, Lake Monk, all of these players who have just been stars. Like, who are the couple of guys on this team who assert themselves as that? I don't think anyone knows. I don't know if Mark Pope knows. But you're going to find out in a couple weeks.
Put on your expert hat from a national level. Who is winning the SEC, and who is your we want to go early Final Four picks, or is it too early?
Yeah.
Name me who wins the SEC and who wins the national championship.
First,
just as of today, before any games, exhibition games, anything started.
First of all, I'm always wrong, because I don't know. Like, you know, people say expert. I'm like, I don't know. Like, you pick Kansas, probably, right? I think Alabama has a really good team. UConn, I'll pick the three-peat. Give me Duke, right? But I reserve the right to change that, like, tonight. You know what I mean? So I don't
You're gonna
know.
have an epiphany, like laying in your hotel room bed. You said, actually, I'm throwing all 4 of those teams out. I'm going with a new 4.
Because you honestly, so much is matchups. Now, UConn the past couple of years has just been steamrolling everybody. That's one thing, but that's rare. For the most part, matchups matter a whole lot. Draw matters a lot. I think Alabama's in a position to win the SEC. They've added, Mark Sears comes back. I think he's the player of the year so far. But did anybody think South Carolina would be a top 3 team? Like, this is going to be a league. Somebody, maybe a couple teams are going to get caught in that gauntlet, and you're not going to be able to get back. Then there are going to be some other teams that start strong, and they're going to carry that momentum, because this is just going to be a tough league to regain momentum. And we'll see what happens.
Last question, the one that's most important. How did you spend your Merry Monday?
Oh, my man, I was catching flights to Atlanta and Auburn, man. Funny story, man. Funny story happened to me, right? So I get on the plane. I'm fortunate enough to sit in first class. This woman sits
Humble brag, by the way.
No. So this woman sits next to me, right? We're about the same complexion. She has a baby, right? So I'm like, oh, hey, to the baby. I don't know this person. So I realize as people are walking by, they think we're a couple. So I'm like, oh, that's why people keep waving at me. But I'm not interacting with the baby. So now people think I'm a deadbeat dad who's like listening to Ludacris's greatest hits and not paying attention to my baby. And I'm noticing it, like, one by one. People of all backgrounds and ages are looking at me. They're looking at her with the baby, and they're looking at me like, why is this dude looking at his baby? It wasn't my baby. Okay? I don't know this person, but I felt like so self-conscious all of a sudden, because I'm like, do people think I'm a deadbeat and they don't realize that I don't know this child? That was a funny story on my way here. But
I feel like you needed to just embrace it and be like, hey, do I need to, help
do?
change a diaper?
Yeah,
do
what
I
do
need
I do?
you just had to just kind of play. If you're going to play the
pick
part,
the
you got to
baby
do it.
up?
Yeah.
What do I do?
I got, honey,
You know what I mean?
I got
That's
you.
the thing.
Come on. I got you.
And then,
baby's fine.
And then at the end of the flight, they let me get up first. And they were like, one guy goes, take care of your baby. And I'm like, what do I say?
We're working through it.
That's what I mean.
Life's ultimate blessing. Truly nothing is better.
So anybody's on that flight, I do love babies. That just wasn't my baby.
I love babies, not that baby.
I didn't know the baby. A cute baby. I didn't know the baby. That's my Merry Monday.
Myron Medcalf, man,
that's a real story. I promise you 100%.
This is a blast, man. We love you around here, and our fans are definitely going to enjoy this. I appreciate you coming on with us.
All right, thanks for having me.